My Hare Krishna, dear devotees, my humble obeisances to all of you. Vanchakalpatarupyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavabhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. So thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity again to be in your good association. Um, I sending my virtual Hare Krishna to all of you. Um, Thank you for allowing me to speak on something from Srimad Bhagavatam. As we heard, from the recitation of these little Vaishnavas, we can see that a lot of beautiful wisdom is mentioned in this second chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. When Prabhupada was traveling, he said many times that my mission is to accompany Srimad Bhagavatam to the Western world. And then his mission was very, very much successful. In the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is everything in terms of philosophy and Siddhanta which needs to be known for us to practice Krishna consciousness. Interesting, the term Siddhanta means it's composed of two words, Siddha and Anta. Siddha means perfection, and Anta means basically end or conclusion, which means the perfect conclusions. So specifically in this second chapter of the first canto, there are absolutely wonderful conclusions of practice of devotional activities. So today's verse is 1 to 15. I'll recite it once with the translation, and then we can go through Prabhupada's purport. Yat anudhyasina yukta karma granti nibadhanam chindanti kovidastasya kona kuryat kataratim. Translation. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to this message? That's a very good question, is it? Who will not pay attention to this message? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The contact of the spiritual spark with material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from the actions and reactions of fruitive work. Liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. This liberation automatically follows for one who constantly remembers the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This is because all the activities of the Supreme Lord, his Leela, are transcendental to the modes of material energy. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore constant association with the spiritual activities of the Supreme Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. It's it's truly like a work of art when you read the very beautiful purpose by Srila Prabhupada. And you can actually write purports and tikas, commentaries of Prabhupada purports. So one of the interesting points in this first paragraph, in this first stanza, is that liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. So this is a very important terminology which is here used, cycle. As we know, one of the terms that we're using is samsara. Samsara literally means like the circle of life. And then it's a circle means obviously circle. It means that it's very difficult to get out of it. It's very difficult to kind of cut this constant repetition, this constant repetitive activity. It's like we are very strongly engrossed within these activities which constantly produce karma. Basically, the main ethos of this verse is to point out to the practical way how to cut out, how to get out from this constant repetition of birth and death. Um, Today we've been in Hamu Hampstead distributing Prabhupada's books, and just one of the thoughts which I had was that people in general, or the masses of people, are not really interested. They're not interested in God or in transcendental knowledge to such a degree that they kind of are willing to do specific and certain activities to kind of get out from this repetition. So one of the enemies of not only devotees or in karmi or people or jivas in general is actually not desiring to have answers or not even have questions in the first place. So one of the very, very important activities that devotees can actually develop in their spiritual lives is being inquisitive. Constantly ask questions. Be inquisitive about the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. And what is this sort of inquisitive nature? It triggers desire to know, desire for knowledge. So recently, His Holiness Chandramuli Maharaj was giving a very beautiful, very elaborate class on how can actually one develop this sort of taste and this hankering for knowledge. And the reason, one of the points he was mentioning, that knowledge is actually power, and power which will allow you to wield the weapon which can cut through this repetitive circle of birth and death. So here in this verse it said, with the sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work. So this sword, this is actually the sword of knowledge. This is the sword of understanding of causality of events. A truly intelligent person is that person who understands that if I do an activity, there will always be a causality, or in other words, there'll be reaction. So this whole material creation, this whole material world is function of this. It functions of activity and it functions of reaction. And spiritual scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita is offering us in-depth understanding of the causality of events. Therefore, there are some very interesting words which we can kind of. I would like to request humbly the devotees if they can mute themselves for the better flow of our class today, please. Or maybe Mataji, you have the host rights. If you can kindly mute the participants, please. Thank you. So continuing, there are certain very important Sanskrit words in this verse. One of them is anudhya, which Prabhupada translated as remembrance. Yuktaha, which Prabhupada translated as being equipped with. And then nimbandhanam, which means internet. Bandhana means like a knot. Bandhana means to be bound. And nimbandhana means that there are so many knots, and there's knots which is made out of knots. And this only shows how the karma, the deep roots of karma are just very perplexing and very intertwined. And the way that how we can kind of counteract this bandhana, this knot, is through anudhya, which means the constant remembrance of the leelas and the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And ultimately, this knowledge which will turn into rasa, which will turn into bhava, which will turn into sort of emotional relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the true wealth of an individual being. Therefore, the constant anudhya, the constant remembrance of the pastimes of the Lord, are the actual true and real weapon to kind of counteract the karmic actions, the karmic causalities of the individual beings. So let's continue reading from Prabhupada's purport, quoting, liberation from material bondage is, therefore, a byproduct of devotional service. And this is a very important point. Attainment of spiritual knowledge is not sufficient to ensure liberation. Such knowledge must be overcoated with devotional service so that ultimately the devotional service alone predominates. Then liberation is made possible. Even the reactionary work of the fruitive workers can lead one to liberation when it's overcoated with devotional service. Karma overcoated with devotional service is called karma yoga. Similarly, empirical knowledge overcoated with devotional service is called jnana yoga. But pure Bhakti Yoga is independent of such karma and jnana, because it alone can not only endow one with liberation from conditioned life, but also award one the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So let's just look at the first sentence of this second paragraph. Liberation from material bondage is therefore a byproduct of devotional service. So it's very interesting that very great sort of community of people or in history is actually very much interested in liberation. Liberation most of the time denotates that being liberated from negativity. Sometimes we are kind of in the situations where things are very difficult, very challenging, very uh, just very tough. And sometimes we just say, well, I hope this will over, or hope this will be finished one day. I just wish I'm over with this. So this sort of desire, it's it's sort of negation of the negative aspect of life, right? I hope it makes sense. Negation of negative aspect of life. But on the other hand, the devotees, they are actually ready to go through negativity, not negativity, but difficulties for the higher sake, for the sake of devotional service. So, but interesting enough, the devotional activity or devotional life or the path of bhakti yoga has a different sort of, as mentioned here, byproducts. So think about it that when you're on a journey, you desire to go, I don't know, you want to go to India, right? You're flying. And as you're flying to India, you kind of are going through a variety of countries which are on the way there. So as a byproduct of your flight, you also, to a certain degree, kind of traveled over a variety of other countries. So same thing with devotional path. We striving for the topmost, but simultaneously the offshoot of bhakti yoga is peace, is tranquility, is happiness, is freedom from stress, is freedom from repetition of birth and death. And on the bigger scale, on the scale of kind of like a human civilization, the offshoot of path of bhakti is good economical progress, peace in the world, spreading of positive agriculture, and in general, peace, education, and tranquility. So we can see how many varieties of different institutions being aiming for all these different things. But as a path of bhakti, it can facilitate all of them and putting them underneath one shelter, the shelter of pure devotional service. And here Prabhupada also refers to how many and variety of our desires, if they are implemented to a certain degree or injected with the path of bhakti, they in itself receive a very purificatory aspect, which means that if you pursue study, if you pursue degree, if you pursue education, that's not a problem. But try to study for Krishna. If you pursue, let's say, economical development, then try to inject Krishna. If you pursue world peace, try to inject Krishna in that your own personal equation. So this is the path of devotional service. Continue reading from the Prabhupada's purport. This is the last paragraph. Therefore, any sensible man who is above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead by hearing about him, by glorifying him, by remembering him, and by worshipping him always without cessation. That is the perfect way of devotional service. The Goswamis of Vrindavan, who were authorized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to preach the Bhakti cult, rigidly followed this rule and made immense literatures or transcendental science for our benefit. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of the different castes and orders of life in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. So here Prabhupada very beautifully glorifies the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, and this is very important, were being authorized by Sri Chaitanya to produce bhakti literature. So this literature we are always and still to this day benefited by, specifically by Rupa Goswami's um, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction is there. and variety commentaries of Jiva Goswami on Srimad Bhagavatam, which Prabhupada was using in his with his compilation and creation of his Bhaktivedanta purports. And again, one of the sentences mentioned here by Prabhupada, therefore, any sensible man who is above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead. So this is very interesting. Here, Prabhupada is creating a different sort of hierarchy of intelligence in a kind of a between the lines. Prabhupada says the sensible man, or someone who's got intelligence, who's beyond or above the average of a person with a poor fund of knowledge, is naturally interested in glorifying the Supreme Lord. So you may ask how this is considered to be intelligent. Well, all this material knowledge that we may possess or we may glorify is still somehow or another connected to some form of bodily functions, right? In a sense that if we strive for, let's say, pursuing of like some mathematics or economical activities or any types of other sciences, these are more or less connected to still functioning of the material nature. Or in other words, also Sankhya. Sankhya philosophy is studying variety of elements, their combination, and ultimately it's like modern type of science. And in conclusion of any different type of science is that if, interesting enough, any real and true scientist who's studying either like the material nature, the cosmos, physics, biology, they have to come to a point where there is something which is not explainable by material science. Like today in Hampstead, I met this elderly lady, and she was a physicist, and she was speaking in her sort of language as a physicist, and I was speaking in a language of Srimad Bhagavatam to a certain degree, to my limited degree. And we both came to conclusion that modern science and the scriptures of Bhakti Shastras, they have natural sort of a line. They're going on the same line. So even physicists, even people which have the humility and some kind of an understanding that there is some godly or spiritual empowerment to the functioning of this material cosmos. And that's a true intelligence. True intelligence, as I was mentioning before, means that you understand that on the bottom of the cup of knowledge is God, is some connection with Krishna. And then the real intelligence comes to place when you naturally start observing that phenomenon, when you start observing that person, when you start developing relationship with them, and you naturally develop sort of attraction to hear and glorify his pastimes. Because ultimately that's the source of taste. Krishna is, how do you say, Akila Rasamrita Murti, the reservoir of all the different rasas, a reservoir of all the variety of relationships. Therefore, true happiness can be only facilitated, in the words of Srimad Bhagavatam, through narration, repetition, remembrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And to come back to the translation of the verse, the person who has intelligence, person who's got Covida, not who has COVID-19, but person who's got Covida, which Prabhupada translated as intelligence, understands that by the weapon of continuous narration and glorification of the Lord, he can kind of cut the knots of material life. And then, which is here mentions as nibandhana, which is always in bandhana, which is always connected and always kind of as a very, very intense knot. So I hope that makes sense. We can open up for a conversation or any questions that devotees have on this specific topic. Again, if anyone wishes to send me a personal message, I will not mention the name. I'll just repeat the question for the benefit of all of us. And otherwise, that's it from my side. Obviously, these verses are very, very deep. I have in front of me also a commentary by Vishwan Chakravarti Thakur, which are very nice. He's referring to a variety of Sanskrit verses, but I'm not going to read, I'm not going to go through them.
Hare Krishna, Antaranga Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances, all grace to Srila Prabhupada. I just want to know the word you use, anudiya, what did you say that meaning? Anu, please.
Anudiya means remembrance.
Remembrance. Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. I really like the way you presented this class. It's so nice. You started with when you went to Hemel Hempstead and talking to different people, and how at the beginning of the verse there's a word where everybody, like Srila Prabhupada also says, a granthi. It's a lot of knots and knots of not liberation and knots of all the material way of life, material way of thinking, not aiming for Krishna. So that's how it gets a big knot, and only those four process which is mentioned the verse before, glorifying, hearing, remembering, and worshiping. That's the only way the knot is going to be get broken. And you yourself, I mean, you took the opportunity, and the lady had the fortune to have converse with the devotee of Krishna, that how she was also trying to see the physics, beyond. I mean, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that ultimately it's him. No matter what knowledge we do, no matter what work we do, ultimately if it doesn't reach to Krishna, then there's no use. That's the only way to understand. So you actually helped that lady to made her realize some kind of a realization she had, that there is beyond physics, there is something, some spiritual part. So that's why it's nice to, for the intelligent, devotee like you, who goes out and get this little spark of these, people who are wandering here and there. It's really nice to hear. It was a really enlightening class. I really enjoyed your class. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Balika Mataji. Always very encouraging. Thank you so much. We have one kind of comment here, and the comment is, can Bhakti devotion be addressed as a cult? Yes, Prabhupada many times refers to it as a cult of Lord Chaitanya or Chaitanya Vaishnavism. I just opened Google Acharya here, and it is said the definition of a cult is a group of people with extreme dedication to a certain leader or set of beliefs that are often viewed as odd by others. That sounds like ISKCON. I mean, I hope I can have extreme dedication to Prabhupada and Gauranga. Certain leader, yeah, Prabhupada is Acharya of ISKCON. Always and if we are seen odd by others, that I'm actually applauding to that, because to be considered normal in this day and age, I will actually take as an offense, because to be normal means smoking, drinking, having intoxication, and doing a lot of activities which are not considered very devotional. So I'm very happy to be considered to be odd and abnormal. Then continuation is always an excessive and misplaced admiration for someone or something, or is something that is popular among a certain segment of society. Well, I think our admiration is not misplaced, because our admiration is supported by scriptures, by science, and by very deep and profound philosophy. So can we call it a cult? Yes, Prabhupada used it a lot, but maybe the denotation which is used in present day and age has a rather a negative sort of meaning for the society. But yeah, Prabhupada was using the term cult, Chaitanya cult of Krishna consciousness. Yeah, so that was one question. I received also privately some questions. Um, I'm going to read it out. I have noticed the word Kovida in different mantras, Hanuman Chalisa, As it is said in the Bhagavad Gita that not a blade of grass moves without his knowledge, there is a reason for COVID which brought the world to a standstill. Well, everything has a reason, right? Everything has its certain specific meaning. Um, yeah, usually these sort of activities on a global scale or even on a macro scale, whatever, they're always a result of a kind of a communal consciousness. So think about it in a such a way that obviously different wars and different things which happened in the past, they're like a physical manifestation of the consciousness of individuals. So when people think in a very negative way and constantly doing a lot of negative activities, all these sort of karmic reactions they accumulate, and in one point they will just pop, and they come as a variety of means. So COVID could be kind of understood as a sort of karmic agent for the humanity at large. So yes, and but in Sanskrit, Kovida means intelligence. There is a private message. Often an inquisitive mind and asking questions is all too often dismissed by some seniors. This is unfortunate. How to change this culture of certain seniors? Well, thank you for the question. Uh, if you look at our books, if you look at our spiritual literature, most of them are written on the premises of questions and answers. Like the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is a big book of Q&A, right, between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami. So questions are very fundamental sort of a principle or a step for further spiritual advancement. So questions are very important. In terms of disapproval or dismissing sort of culture from a senior Vaishnavas, uh, I cannot say why they do it, and I don't wish to criticize, or I don't have the capacity to answer why people, why devotees are dismissing certain questions. I personally think that in Krishna consciousness, nothing should be a taboo, nothing should be a sort of a debate or a discussion which is beyond reasonable sort of Vaishnava etiquette and Vaishnava dealing. I think any and every question should be asked and freely. Maybe if you don't find the answers from the people you're asking, you can redirect your questions to someone who you maybe have some trust, have some relationships, and you trust them that they might sort of uh, answer it to their full capacity. So I personally found all my questions answered, maybe not right in the spot, but in maybe a couple of days later or a few weeks later. Or even the best way you can do is that you find the answers for yourself. And usually the answers, most of the time, they come from Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita. So the answers are there. Yeah, that's all I can say. But thank you for the question. That's a very important question. Another question here was, cult has a rigid boundaries then. Yeah, I mean, Krishna consciousness also has a very rigid boundaries, right? We have 4 regulated principles, minimum 16 rounds, at least to be eligible for initiation. So we do have rigid boundaries. Um, I mean, I assume or I suggest that you do a research, maybe do a thesis, do like your own essay, Surabi. Surabi, do your own essay in the sense that do research on the terminology of cults and different factors of a cult, and see them in the connection of Krishna consciousness or ISKCON, if there are any sort of similarities. And it will be nice discussion or nice topic for discussion. Is Krishna consciousness a cult? In the 80s and the 70s, they very much thought it was a cult, and they've been doing all these. Uh, they've been kidnapping different devotees, and they try to they brainwashing. They've been already brainwashed by Prabhupada. There's one interesting book. I think many of you must read it. It's called Salted Bread. It's uh, it's written as an experience or a biography of this one Russian devotee who was kind of connected with distributing books and starting Krishna consciousness in Armenia and in Russia. It's a powerful book, and it shows really dedication of devotees, how they really took to their heart the mission of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya. Any other questions devotees would like to ask? I'm just going to remind that if they want, you can send me privately a message, and obviously no name will be mentioned, or otherwise you can voice or kind of unmute yourself. And if you have any points or any comments or any questions, please um, share them with us now. Chandramouli Maharaj was recently speaking about the power of questions, right? Power of inquisitive nature. And he was speaking that there are two reasons why there are no questions asked. The reason number one is that things are clear, acceptable, understandable, realized. And point number two is that it just doesn't want to be discussed further. Roadmap to a simple life without cult following. Is that possible? Roadmap to a simple life without cult following. Um, by Surabi. Well, simple life obviously, as it denotes, requires simplicity. And simplicity as such is very complicated. So it's easy to be complicated, and it's complicated to be simple or to be easy. Therefore, simple life requires a lot of knowledge, and simple life requires a lot of realization, and simple life also requires a lot of sort of spiritual dedication. Because to be simple, that equally shows that you are not interested in material life. You're not interested in material activities. And to achieve really simplicity it's not very easy. It's challenging. It takes years and decades and lifetimes. And my spiritual master, His Holiness Kadamba Kanana Maharaj, says that simplicity means that we have nothing to hide. We have nothing to hide in front of the world. We are like an open book. So yes, simplicity is difficult, and without cult following. Well, uh, I mean, if you desire to achieve simplicity, I assume that you would be following certain rules and regulations, like not buying too many things, obviously maintaining mode of goodness sort of life. And these things, because our mind is always very turbulent and not sort of tempered, not relaxed, it constantly desires more and more and more. And don't forget, or we should not forget, that one of the austerities of the mind is satisfaction, to be satisfied. And as I said again, to be satisfied, it's not such an easy thing. So I would say even simplicity requires a lot of practice, and a lot of dedication, and a lot of sort of internal maintenance, and a lot of contemplation, and ultimately a lot of knowledge, and a lot of practice, and a lot of depth. And so, yeah, I think simplicity requires a lot of um, work, work to be done. Yeah. Okay. If there are
Hare
any other
Krishna.
questions, yes.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Antaranga Prabhu. I just with the conversation of simplicity, it reminded me that the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan were the most simple people, simple people, but the way they lived their life, because they had the most because they are transcendentally so much situated, and that is the only way they could have that simple life without having proper knowledge within ourselves and our connection to the Supreme. It's very difficult to just have a simple life, so-called simple life. It's not possible. You do need a lot of spiritual strength, and actually you need to realize who God is and our relation. Otherwise, it is very difficult to have it just simple life. This is my understanding of scripture and by the life of the Goswamis.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It always requires a lot of saturation. You have to be to be materially simple, you have to be spiritually strong.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
There is another question. I think we can make this one the last one, and then we can wrap up our session today. Has Govinda sent COVID infection to this world to teach the world spiritual dedication, education? Well, nothing happens without the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet on the other side, Krishna is very much aloof. Krishna is aloof from this material world and the dealings of the material world because he has many of his agents, specifically the Durga Devi, or the illusionary energy of Krishna, and she's kind of working as an agent, right? She's the one who's basically running this material world on behalf of the Supreme Lord with his benedictions. Therefore, I can't really say if Krishna sanctioned. It could be, it's just like one of the varieties of dealing with other people's karma, right? It could be a war, it could be a tornado, it could be an earthquake, it could be atomic bomb, it could be a variety of other things. So so yeah, if Krishna sent it, Krishna sanctioned it. If Krishna sent it specifically, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on this one, but I've been told that Sailesh Prabhu, he raised his hand. I apologize if I haven't seen it. If Prabhu is here, kindly unmute yourself and please make your point, you make a question.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Jay. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam, Yogesh Prabhu. Thank you for a wonderful class, Prabhuji. I just wanted to make a point where I think we in ISKCON all too easily allow others to refer to our belief set as a cult, and quite often we internally also use the word cult. The word cult, unfortunately, has quite a lot of negative and derogatory connotations in the eyes of external worlds. Is normally referred to unorthodox or satanic or misplaced admiration type following, whereas of course our philosophy is central most to all of human society, and it is certainly not a cult. It is mainstream. Vaishnavism is absolutely mainstream. It would be nice if we could somehow, sort of try and move away from referral to our philosophy as being cultish, or letting others refer to our philosophy as being cultish. In fact, it is mainstream, and we should point out the Bhagavad Gita and teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are central to every Hindu or every human being on the planet, to be honest. So how do we educate people to refocus their mind, particularly in ISKCON, because we allow ourselves to be referred to as a cult, and we often ourselves refer to it as a cult. So we should try and move away from that. So your assistance on this within our society would be greatly appreciated, Prabhuji.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. As you said, it has a negative connotation. Ultimately, you actually gave the answer in your own sort of point, and that is education. Education is the most powerful, most potent weapon, most powerful than anything we can imagine. Education is ultimately the greatest sword against ignorance of the masses, and the greatest weapon in the hands of education personified is book distribution. So maybe, yeah, I'm quite biased as saying it as a book distributor, but to distribute Prabhupada's literature, to distribute Prabhupada's books is actually, I see as a greatest sort of fight against the misguided misinterpretation of a variety of topics, not just on the topic of occult, but on life in general. And Srila Prabhupada's books, what they offer a very unique understanding of the reality as it is, peaceful, yet deep, satisfying, enlightening, and something which really can give a path to your life. So the greatest weapon in the hand of education personified is book distribution. So Hare Krishna. Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai.
I like to thank to Shailesh Prabhu to bring that that thing out. It's really clarified the situation. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your kind time and your kind attention. Wishing you all the best. Yeah, have a blessed weekend. Have a blessed Sunday. Tomorrow, actually here in the Mana, we're releasing the cows. They're being stationed in the barn for winter period, and tomorrow, I think around 9:30, they're releasing them. It's a very nice, very lovely little festival. Very beautiful experience, especially for the children. I'm always there. It's always good fun. So feel free to come to Bhaktivedanta Mana tomorrow. Otherwise, Ramanavami is coming very soon, so we can focus our meditation on Lord Ramachandra and his wonderful servants and associates. With that said, I'm wishing you a very, very beautiful and very nice week ahead. And Hare Krishna, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.